Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our virtual think tank on our day before Halloween. Very excited to have you with us and share some excellent information. Just as a reminder, we will be recording this webinar and posting it to our CalTPA YouTube playlist, but I wanted to let everyone know that it is recording. And so if there's information that you don't get in this first round, it will be posted by the end of the day today so that you'll be able to access it at another time. So I want to let you know that Amy Reising, who is our Director of Assessment Policy and Development, unfortunately will not be able to join us this morning. However, I, James Webb, a consultant with Performance Assessment Development, will be here with you. And I'm going to be joined by Dr. Lara Kassab from San Jose State University. And I will let her in a few moments introduce herself and give you a little bit of background from her. In addition to being at San Jose State, Dr. Kassab was also a BITSA coordinator, and so in a school district. So we are going to have some folks from induction joining us. So as Laura said to me earlier, she definitely speaks induction, so that's fabulous. So I just wanted to let you know that we do have some think tanks coming up that may be of interest to you. We will be skipping November because it is a shortened month. And as we know, the last Friday of the month for November is the Friday after Thanksgiving. So we do not have a virtual think tank then, but we will have one on December the 4th. Many of you have given us a lot of feedback that you would like to see education technology in the hands of primary grades. That should read TK through 3. We are going to have an expert from a district in Southern California who is a teacher on special assignment charged with educational technology, a Google certified teacher, and she will be providing some excellent resources to use education technology in a meaningful way for TK through 3. Then on January 29th, we will be talking about supporting preliminary TPA and PSVTW candidates in completing the CalTPA. And then we're excited in February to provide an update on the Education Specialist CalTPA, which is currently in pilot study at 15 institutions around the state. So we're excited about that work and sharing that with you. As a reminder, we do have resources online. We have our own YouTube channel with the commission. And then as a subset, there is a playlist, and the bit.ly is here. On the slide, I will also put this into the chat for you so that you can access that, where you can find a wealth of different webinars, some done by Dr. Kassab earlier in the year, and others that we have that are very important and relevant to working in online environments for teachers. As a reminder, our other program supports, we do have weekly office hours. We have opened them up to induction candidates on Wednesdays at 4:15. Teacher induction staff meet Thursdays from 9 to 9:45. Karen Sacramento, another commission staff member who works with induction, joins us on Thursday mornings. So it's a great way for induction programs to hear from both Karen and the PA team around how to support candidates with the CalTPA. And then finally, preliminary program staff, we still have our office hours on Thursdays from 10 to 10:30 a.m. Just a reminder about supporting Windows, where we are. As you can see, we do have Windows open at least once a month, possibly even twice a month. For example, in December, also in April, as we know in June, because as we know, those are generally times when classes are ending or courses are ending, clinical practice may be wrapping up. So it gives you an opportunity to have your candidates submit. And the way that we always read this is on the right is when they submit by 11:59. And then on the left is when they would receive their score report. Just as a friendly reminder, when a candidate submits his or her CalTPA, they do receive their results within 3 weeks after submission. Okay, so now I am going to turn it over to Dr. Kassab, who is going to lead us through online instruction and the CalTPA, tips, tricks, and tools. Love the idea of the tricks, especially with our weekend coming up with Halloween. So Dr. Kassab, thank you so much for joining us, and I will now turn it over to you.
Great, thank you so very much. Welcome everyone who is here and attending with us this morning. It looks like at the moment we are a small but mighty group, and I hope you are all ready. You've got your fingers ready because this is going to be an interactive experience as well as a learning experience. Fabulous, fabulous. So I am Dr. Lara Kassab. I am an assistant professor of teacher education at San Jose State University. And in my past life, I was a high school teacher, a BITSA mentor, and also a BITSA coordinator for the Milpitas Unified School District in Milpitas, California. I also do review programs for induction as well as for K-12 teacher preparation. So if we can go to the next slide. Awesome. So this morning, I thought I would take you on a journey about how I have leveraged the shift to online instruction for transformational teacher learning as a way of helping you get some tips, tricks, and ways of thinking about how you can help your own mentors or candidates or new teachers make some of the transitions to teaching online. Next slide, please. So one of the first things I do in any presentation or in any class is I like to get everyone centered and focused. And in a physical classroom, we do a mindfulness activity. However, in a virtual classroom, it's a little more challenging to lead. So I have here a video that I found on YouTube that's absolutely phenomenal. It's only 1 minute long. And I'd like everyone in here to please just take a moment to put everything else aside and focus on the screen. And what we're going to be doing is triangle breathing. So what you want to do is sit comfortably with your shoulders in line with your hips so your lungs have plenty of room to expand. And you can see here on the screen, there's a small triangle that's going to turn into a flat line in a moment. And then it's going to come up, it's going to expand out, and then it's going to contract and compress. As that triangle expands, that's when we're going to be inhaling or breathing in. So it'll be, and then once it gets out to its fullest, it'll stop for a second and then it will decrease. And as it decreases, we want to exhale. To get the most out of this, you want to inhale through your nose and exhale through your mouth. But if you feel silly doing that, you can inhale and exhale through your nose. James, could you push play, please? So breathe in and breathe out. Breathe in and breathe out. All right, thank you so much. So when I use this in the classroom or in trainings, the next thing I do is actually ask people, and you can feel free to do this if you wish, go ahead and throw an idea into the chat as to how this made you feel this morning, or when you might want to use this in your own practice, teaching new teachers, teaching pre-service teachers, or the third thing is, what did I do? So this is where it gets a little metacognitive and getting into the pedagogy. What did I do to set up this activity to make it successful? And those are the three questions that I have my candidates answer every single time we do any new activities. So if you are one of the people in here who feels like you'd like to respond to that, go ahead and pop into the chat a quick little or just a reaction to doing that particular activity. One of the big reasons why it's very important for us to do mindfulness, especially right now and especially online, is that we are all of us, teachers, students, families, university professors, administrators, all of us are experiencing some level of trauma. And so providing a moment to step back, to focus on something outside of our lives, and then to come together and move on is extremely helpful for all of us. Fabulous. So if we'll go to the next slide, please. And I can see a couple people are chiming in on the chat with some great ideas. All right, so what happened with COVID in March was a bit of a massive speed bump for us all. And one of the things that I have worked through in my own practice and that I'm now trying to help my future teachers see is that although this is a pretty dramatic and serious situation, it also provides us with some unexpected opportunities to transform and think about transforming our practice. So when we look at going from a face-to-face course or face-to-face classroom to an online environment, it's extremely hard because most of us at this point in time haven't experienced online instruction as students. And so how do we teach? How do we move into what we're doing in an environment where we haven't been students, let alone teachers? So I saw this as an opportunity for me to really start to look at some of the research, and some of the research is on how we can transform our practice. I also thought about how this is really centering the context and the pedagogy components of how we teach. How are we thinking about our students? How are we thinking about our K-12 students and their settings and the life and the context in which they're living right now? And to really focus on collaboratively constructing what it means to center students, to build relationships and community. And our program is one that is very, very grounded in a social justice and culturally sustaining framework. So that was another opportunity to think. Next slide, please. So when I look at these things, I try to look at what are the affordances. Whenever I'm stuck with a situation, I guess I'm a Pollyanna who always tries to look at what's the best thing that I can make out of this. So one of the things that we have to do is think about, we have some abilities for flexibility here in really thinking about how to make the most of synchronous and asynchronous spaces. So we also have the opportunity to think about, in an online setting, this is where we can really open up opportunities for students to have more voice and more choice, both in social and academic input and outputs. So I have found that both myself and my students who report back to me what they're doing in their student teaching have really found that leveraging this idea of you can respond by unmuting your mic or in the chat. So you're giving students a choice of how they want to show you what they're learning, to ask questions that our quieter students really like being able to respond in chat. And our vocal students like being able to have those conversations with their microphones unmuted. The other big advantage is it's pretty much pajama day every day. For those of us who've ever taught in K-12, we know that pajama day in Spirit Week was one of the days we all looked forward to. So that's just a little levity in the slide this morning. I feel good. The next slide, please. So then we look at what are the constraints and how can we work around that. As I've already mentioned, we really need to be thinking about how are we approaching this with an awareness that we're all in various stages and states of trauma. We've experienced here in the Silicon Valley a great disparity in access to both hardware and infrastructure. We have a lack of that informal and visual connection building. So all of those spaces where we as teachers, it's outside of our teaching time, when students are coming into the classrooms, when students are leaving the classrooms, when we have a break time, and we have those informal moments to connect with our students and talk about how has your day been, what are the things that you like to do, all of those things that help us build connections and relationships. It's really, really challenging in an online environment to try to find those things. It also has made videos of practice and trying things out very challenging. Our program is one in which we ask our candidates to record themselves teaching and then do some real critical analysis of their practice, reflecting on what they're doing well and where they want to grow. And as many of my fellow friends who are still teaching in K-12, everything takes twice as long to plan, right? It's not as easy to just update that lesson as we think it's going to be. It always takes us twice as long as we thought it would. Next slide, please. So one of the things I do is to ask myself 3 questions. And the first question that I ask myself to really look at how this pedagogy can transform is ask myself, what's my academic purpose? And when I ask myself, what's my academic purpose, this is where I really broke out the lesson. Instead of thinking, I'm going to have my students, my class is usually 2.5 hours long, and I'm going to make my students come and sit online in a synchronous environment for 2.5 hours. Instead, I thought, well, what parts of my class are things that are really benefited? My academic purpose is best served through synchronous activities. And so when I think about what I want to do in the Zoom meeting, I think about how I'm leveraging the togetherness of it. So group work is something that I think absolutely has to happen during synchronous time. In order to help us build those connections, I have between 10 and 15 minutes of every class session is just open social time. And they use a virtual whiteboard on Zoom. They draw, they love it, I love it, but they've really expressed that that's a great opportunity that they love to be able to do some of the connecting that's missing in online spaces. Everything else I've put into asynchronous. So it gives students a space for silence, for flexibility in time, and also to be able to rewind and rewatch. So I use discussion boards, lectures, all of those things are going into asynchronous spaces. And this is the biggest aha. If you're going to give instructions for an assignment, put them in a video format and in a written format and make them asynchronous. This semester, I have had many fewer questions about details on assignments because they can watch, rewatch, rewind the videos that tell them what they're expected to do in assignments. So for the big assignments, I strongly suggest making those into videos. Next slide, please. So here's a slide just sharing with you that when we're thinking about those breakout rooms, similar to the way that we set norms and expectations for roles in a physical classroom group work, we have to do that again online. And in fact, I do it every single time I have my students go into a breakout room, well, every single session. And the reasoning behind this is we have to help them understand, again, what it is they're expected to do and how they're expected to do it in online environments. And the younger your students are, the more important and essential it is to do this. So I have here 3 examples of how I've rethought of giving those group work roles and design them to be collaborative. So rather than the secretary, the artist, so instead of thinking about what are those roles that really aren't necessarily truly connected, I've thought about rewriting them so that you can't do your role without interacting and engaging with the others in your group. Otherwise, you may have a breakout room. If you've ever gone into a breakout room as a teacher and it's silent, you might want to think about, how did I write my roles, if that makes sense. James, this is going to be available, this PowerPoint's available for everyone after the meeting, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Fabulous. And I forgot to say at the beginning, I'm a fast talker and I go gangbusters through. James is moderating the chat. So if you have any questions or want me to slow down, I've had 2 cups of coffee, go ahead and pop a question into the chat as we go. Excellent. Next slide, please. All right. So the first thing I want to do is share with you how to, and this is where we're going to start to get interactive. One of the things I've done is looking at the strategy of a carousel, or you have students putting posters up around the room, walking around and looking at each other's posters. Instead, what I've figured out to do is to use Google Slides with Zoom in order to create and simulate the experience of a carousel activity. So these are just some tips for you and a how-to on how to actually go forward and do that. So we're about to try this out on our own. So I'm going to model for you using Google Slides as a way of simulating a carousel activity. So you'll want to make sure that you're always giving instructions. You want to make sure that those instructions are both verbal and written. You want to make sure that when you generate the link to the slides that you have clicked on the button that says anyone with the link can edit. And then think about how you're going to share that out. So in modeling that, generating the link and sharing the link, if you look in the chat, I've just posted the 3 links that we're going to use interactively for today's presentation. If we can go to the next slide, please. So now we're going to try Google Slides in a Zoom breakout room. Next slide, please. So one of the things I have my students do very, very first, and by the way, right now I'm giving you a little time to click on that link and get it opened up so you're ready to jump in when we jump into the activity. But one of the things I do with my students when I have them do this activity the first time is I try to manage their cognitive load. And so having them connect socially first, I have my students come up with a team name, things they have in common. And then in Google Slides, one of the things that's great is that they can add images. So here's an example. Next slide. After they go through building the team, then I give them the actual content work to do. And then each team will fill out the actual slide. And then I have the students go in and use the comment feature as their virtual sticky note. So you'll be experiencing this in just a moment, but this slide represents the center part is the slide itself. And then I've gone in and added a couple virtual sticky note questions or comments. Next slide, please. So this is just again, a gallery walk or carousel, a little more explanation. Next slide. All right, so we're going to dive in and try it. So if you go into this link in the chat, it will open up shared slides. And can you open that up, James? Fabulous. Here we all are.
Yes, in order to share my screen again, I'm going to go, there we are.
Okay. Excellent. So now here's the cool thing. As a teacher, when you're using Google Slides this way, I've put everyone in a breakout room, and right now we're going to virtually break out. I'd like everyone who's participating right now to just pick a number between 1 and 10. And what you're going to do is you're going to then choose, James, if you'll stay in this view, but go down 2 slides. And so what you'll see is there's group 1, group 2, group 3, group 4, et cetera, et cetera. So you'll be responding on the slide that corresponds with the number you're thinking. So between 1 and 10, Some of you will be group 1, some will 2, 3, 4. If we were in a Zoom classroom scenario, I would have you go into breakout rooms, but I want you as educators to be able to see the behind the scenes, okay? So now that we're all logged on here, you can see along the bottom of each slide, you can see where your class members are. And if you click on the second slide there, here's where we have our prompt. So what I'd like you to do is think about any questions or ideas that have arisen for you based on what I've presented so far, because we haven't gotten a lot of interactivity. And then when you finish putting your idea on a slide, you can take a look at the other group's slides, and by going to Insert, and then you scroll down Insert to Comment, you can leave a comment for someone on their screen, on their slide, okay? And it's down there at the bottom. Thank you, James. So what I'd like to do is I'm gonna stop talking for 2 minutes, and just any ideas that you have, even if you don't really have an idea, just a hello, put something on a slide and then try out going in and placing a virtual sticky note to appear. So everyone just picks one of those slides. And I can see at least one person's going in and placing some. As the teacher, again, this is a benefit of the Google Slides, is as the teacher, I can see who's jumping in on what screens, which screens are active. And for those of us who are worried about giving too much or too little time in breakout groups, I use this as a visual monitor first. And then if I see like a lot of people sitting on a slide and no active movement, that's when I'll go into that particular breakout room. So the students are given the assignment to align their breakout room with the slide number, and then I can pop in and hear, are they struggling with a concept of the content, or are they talking about their weekend? As a former high school teacher, that's something that happens. Okay, excellent. So it's a nice way to be able to do a little informal, formative assessment of progress and formative assessment of ideas. Right? So we've got a couple ideas on slides, so go ahead and try out the virtual sticky note. So James, let's click on slide number 4. And here we have, excellent, it's helpful to have this practice, great. So if we highlight that now, it's helpful to have this practice. James, please, thank you. And then we'll leave as insert comment. So up to insert and comment, there we go. And James is showing you how it's done. And then we can type in, great idea. Okay. And so this is just a way that you can use Google Slides with Zoom and breakout rooms to really make it an interactive experience. You're not worried about what's happening in the breakout rooms because you can see and then pop into and out of the breakout rooms to monitor what's going on in student breakout rooms. All right, so let's click through a couple slides and see where we are, James, on people leaving some comments. Here we go. Fabulous. And planet Earth. Wonderful. Awesome. So can we take a look and see, are there any questions that are answerable? How can induction program leaders best assist candidates with preparing video tasks for the CalTPA? That is a great question. And let's put that at the end, and I'll see if I can leave some time for us to have that as a good question at the end. All right, so if we'll go back to the main slide presentation. Awesome. Hopefully that was helpful for all of you. And again, we'll take a look at all of those questions as we move through. I want to make sure we stay kind of on time and on task here. I always plan way more than I can squish into one presentation. So if we go back to our,
Oops.
that's okay.
Okay. I went to the wrong, I apologize.
That's okay.
And then
just scroll down, scroll, right there.
There.
Yep, perfect. We'll go to the next one. All right, so then my second pedagogical question was thinking about how am I really thinking about the context of my students and what they're experiencing in this time and setting. You can see behind me here, I have the set from Dr. Strange. So one of the things I do to try to help connect with my students is when I find out something about them, I'll include in my background something that they can connect with. Another thing that I try to do is really think about how am I fostering the social, emotional, and cultural learning of my students? How am I modeling for them the skills that we want them to teach to K-12 students for SEL? And so each session I have the mindfulness component that we did at the very beginning, and then I also include community building. When we are in a state of trauma, it's usually a state that we're in because things are just out of our control. And right now, there's a lot that's out of our control. So giving tools for coping with, giving tools for kind of attending to ourselves is very important, but it's also important to provide our students, K-12 and university and teacher education and first-year teachers with more control. So using voice and choice and thinking about those principles of universal design for learning, of multiple modes of representation, multiple modes of production. I try to offer for any assignment a video and visual or audio and visual option. So a podcast, a video, as well as a reading. And then I try to find things that cover the same information. So if a student processes better auditorily, they can choose the podcast option. I also teach my students how to use screen readers, and I make sure that all of my materials meet ADA requirements so that I don't know if you all know this, but some versions of PDFs cannot be read by a screen reader. They are images, not screen reader friendly. I also think to myself, how many ways can my students demonstrate that they're learning the learning objective? And again, these are both things I model in my classroom and teach my teacher candidates to do as far as thinking about and approaching how they're teaching in their own classrooms, especially in online environments. Next slide, please. So one of the things I do with social emotional learning is I lean very heavily, this is my favorite tool, and I'm not paid by them for anything, but I just like how many different things it does. For social emotional learning and for community building, I model how students can use something like Poll Everywhere's "How are you feeling today?" tool to check in on students. Next slide, please. A couple other things that we've done is they have a enter and answer and then upvote. So we've done reading recommendations, books that everyone should read, and then if they agree and think that sounds like an interesting book, they upvote. Where's a place that you would love to visit if money and COVID were no worry? It's another opportunity. And we're actually going to use one right now. If we can go to the next slide, please. And so what I'd like you to do is now interact and engage. Think about 3 words that describe you. So for instance, my 3 words might be caring, funny, and talkative. Okay, so I'd like you to think about 3 words that describe you, and you have the choice of either responding at pollev.com/Lara Kassab. I'll go ahead now, it's the second link that I just put into the chat, Lara Kassab 126. Or if you'd rather text using your phone, you can text Lara Kassab 126 to 37607 and then text the 3 words that describe you. And while you are doing that, you'll see all the information in just a minute, because I'm going to take over for just a moment. And I'm going to share for you what this looks like on the teacher side. So here again are the instructions, pollev.com, Lara Kassab 126, or text. And as you text some responses, we'll see what happens. So please text. Oh, I know why you can't do it there. Sorry, now, please try it now. Operator error. So go ahead and post 3 words that describe you. Here we go. And so this is a very cool community building tool, right? I use this a lot to have my students just check in on where we are. Who are we as a community? It's a word cloud generator. And the way that word cloud generators work is the more frequent an answer comes up, the bigger that answer is in the word cloud. So right now, more than one person has said happy, but the rest of us have so far put in single words, but this is really something very helpful. As a literacy strategy, if I were doing this with K-12 students, I might ask them to put in words from the text that describe a given character. Or if we're doing a mathematics exercise, I might ask them to put in a concept that they would love for me to spend more time on. It's anonymous, so students aren't afraid to share at this point what things they want to work on more. And it's also a way that as a teacher, you can literally see what is the number one thing that students need us to revisit or reorganize. So it can be an anonymous, informal check for understanding or informal assessment, as well as a community building tool. Excellent.
Laura, is there a way to filter words or things that, we would not want? I'm thinking again of high school.
Yes.
Because I know that sometimes could be a profanity filter on some programs. Is this one that would have that, or do you have to set filters for that?
I can investigate that. I don't know off the top of my head if this particular tool has that. I do know other tools do.
Like Padlet, for example, has a profanity filter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I am, as I said, I'm not sure. I haven't had to look at that in a couple of years. So
no, that's okay.
But I do also very much have my students talk about and teach. We need to explicitly be teaching students about appropriate and inappropriate behavior online. Mm-hmm. So that is a very good point as well to think about and consider, is that when we're using some of these tools, before we start using them with students, we want to help them understand appropriate use and such. Excellent. So then hopefully that was slightly enjoyable for you and at least give you some insight or interests. This is just a place where when we talk about recording ourselves online, And I said earlier, one of the things in my course is basically it's kind of a CalTPA practice activity, asking candidates to videotape themselves teaching and then reflect on their practice. And they annotate, they practice their annotation skills. And of course, these are all videos very early in this semester that they're not going to be actually using for the CalTPA. They actually don't know it's a CalTPA practice until halfway through. But one of the things we found was that some of our school districts that we have students placed in actually have said there's absolutely positively no video recording. There's been a lot of pushback from parents about online video recording. So several school districts have said there's no recording of students. So we came up with some choices here around what assignment could I have my students do that would still give them the ability to practice annotating and critically analyzing a video. So what you see here is the first column is those who could record themselves and annotate themselves. And then if they couldn't record and annotate, the option that I gave them instead, I went out and found several videos of face-to-face classrooms that are open, available, and okay. So they'd watch just 5 minutes of a face-to-face class exemplar. They would practice annotating what they're seeing as good moves for creating a safe and positive learning environment. Then the instruction was that even though they couldn't record themselves teaching, that they would try something they saw in the video. And then when they wrote their final reflection, it would be, I saw the teacher in the video do this, or when I was watching the video, it made me think this. So I tried this in my classroom, and here's how I'm reflecting on my practice. So thinking about those voice and choice pivots also allows you to pivot when you're hit with something halfway through the semester that you weren't expecting. Then also thinking about, I already said, all assignments, in addition to getting the readings as video or audio, I've also given my students the option to write or produce. So every assignment in my class can be submitted written or in a multimedia format. So some of my students are building websites, some of my students are doing a screencast video, some of my students are doing audio, some of them are doing collage. It's actually been really cool to open up creativity for students based on providing those voice and choice pivots that are both pedagogical and attending to context. Next slide, please. So one of the things I have here is a Padlet. I see we're running almost out of time. So what I'm going to do is just suggest, if you'd like, after the class, if you have any tips, apps, or ideas that you have for increasing student voice and choice in the classroom, please feel free to add to the group Padlet. And I've posted that in the chat. It's the third link in the chat. And if we go to the next slide, the next thing I thought about was how can I leverage synchronous and asynchronous tools, student voice and choice in the classroom to confront systemic racism in education. So this is basically a little bit deep, a little bit detailed, and I think I might not have a whole lot of time to really jump into this. So I'll just tell you quickly and then we'll move to questions because I think we have some questions to answer. But one of the things I thought about was providing my students with opportunities to really get in, dig in, and discuss some of the things that, for instance, the CalTPA is asking that we haven't necessarily experienced as students. So when we take a look at how are we addressing social and emotional learning, I know that I probably would have been a better person had I had social emotional learning in K-12, but to be able to actually dig in and talk about what were my experiences, what are the things my students are experiencing, and then what does that mean for my practice? So that's basically the heart of the SPOP, the systemic problem of practice, is we'll look at a problem of practice such as making sure students have social and emotional tools in the classroom. I give my students two options for participating in these discussions. One is that after the initial hour and a half that I'm now spending synchronous of my scheduled class time, we take a break, and then those who wish to stay and have that discussion synchronously will come back. The rest of the students do that discussion asynchronously using a discussion board. And one of the things the students have expressed is they really appreciate the ability to choose every week whether they feel like talking about the topic or writing about the topic. Some of the students really prefer to be able to write about and engage with one another through written form, and others prefer to be able to do it verbally. So that's kind of a summation. If you get a chance to look at the slides, James, if you want to just kind of click through them. This is a little bit more detail, and then I've got some examples of how we, for instance, did a reading called Bringing Race into Second Language Acquisition by Flores and Rosa. And these are the prompts that were used in that particular SPOP. Next slide, please. And then the feedback and repercussions that I've gotten so far on the SPOPs themselves. Next slide. And then I would have us do an SPOP together if we had a little more time, but I want to make sure that I'm giving you time at the end of this to answer any questions that you might have. So if we want to go ahead and click to the question slide. There we go. Any questions?
And I think what we'll do is you can either post them in the chat, or we don't have a large number of people on this particular Zoom. So if you would just like to unmute yourself and ask Dr. Kassab your questions, please do so. But Laura, just to loop back to a question that we had in the Google Slides, it was about induction. So maybe we could start with that one, and then that might prompt some other ideas coming forward.
Perfect. Can you read that to me again?
Yes, let me get to that. Hold on just a moment.
Yeah, it's all the fun screen swapping, right?
It is most definitely.
Excellent.
Okay.
And I really want to thank everyone who came today, the day before Halloween, in the morning, on a Friday. And I'm just very glad you're all here. So thank you for coming.
Okay, I'm just reloading the question again.
Sounds good.
Okay, so the question is, how can induction program leaders best assist candidates with preparing video tasks for the CalTPA?
That is a great question. The first thing I would do is I would find out if the preparation programs from which they're coming, have they already had experiences in doing reflective video practice? Many of us in teacher prep have designed and developed and built in, like I said, in my class, we have this video assignment that happens in my class multiple times. So I would find out first which of my incoming new teachers have experience in doing reflective video in their preparation program. And then if they do not have experience in preparation in their video program, the next thing I would do would be to have them do some really low risk activities. Many of us really hate recording ourselves and watching ourselves. So having them just practice recording themselves, maybe teaching in an empty room first and watching that on their own, not sharing with their mentor, not sharing with any of the program. Having them, here are some tips that we've learned over the years, having them set up the recording device in the classroom and not turn it on for several days. But just so the students in the room get used to it, so that they're going to accurately capture what it is that they want you or their mentor to see. The first time, students see a camera in the room, you can be teaching your heart out at the front, and you'll see, one or two of the students doing this thing, right? So here's the camera and they're, right? And then they pop out again. So just, these are some of the tips that we would give to our own candidates when they start doing the teaching and the recording. Also to be kind to themselves, because when they start watching, remembering that this is about us honoring the things we do well in our practice and finding places to expand and extend our practice. So those would all be tips I would give to an induction program. If you want technical stuff, email me and I'll see if I can share some of my technical tips with you.
Thank you so much. Just something came up in the chat, just a thank you to try out Google Slides, poll Ev, and the option for the Padlet. Just appreciative of the information with that.
Great, thank you. What other questions?
If you'd like to unmute yourself and ask, please feel free.
Hi, Dr. Kassab. I've had a lot of good fortune with Flipgrid, and I just wondered if you use that and how you apply it.
Joe, it was difficult to hear you. Could you repeat the question and maybe speak closer to the microphone if that's possible?
I'm sorry, sure. Dr. Kassab, I use Flipgrid, but I wondered if you're familiar with that and how you would use that, if you have any tips for that.
Absolutely. So again, all of my approaches to using technology tools is to consider that some of my students may never have done even something similar. Some of them may be experts. So I try to separate like the challenge, the mental load, by having the first time we use a tool be something that doesn't necessarily require them to get too academic. So I use Flipgrid. It's actually the very first assignment they do. Before we even start our face-to-face synchronous classes, I have them do a quick introduction video, and it's the story of their name. So in this video using Flipgrid, one of the big advantages to Flipgrid is that the other students in class can watch the video so that everyone can see the video. So they're instructed to make a video, and I do an exemplar with their name, tips on how to pronounce their name, their preferred pronouns, if they would like us to use preferred pronouns. And the third thing is a story about your name. It can be the meaning of your name, or it can be a story from your life about your name. And for those students who may not know the meanings of their names or think they have a story, I always include a link in the instructions to like one of those "what does your name mean" websites, so that they have the opportunity to come up with a story of their name if they don't already have one. And if you look me up on Flipgrid, I can share that instructional piece with you, because I think that's one of the things you can do is share the assignments so others can use them in a bank.
That's so interesting, because I've used both assignments, but I've never married the two. That's really brilliant. Thank you.
Cool.
Okay, is there another question that you'd like to have put out there? Again, just please feel free to unmute yourself. We have approximately 5 more minutes. A lot of thank yous in the chat, Dr. Kassab, so appreciate all that information. I actually would like to ask a question. My husband is a teacher, and he's working with 9th and 10th graders. It's a fairly new school, so they don't have as many. And he's finding some frustrations with students not turning in assignments. You know, he's trying to give a lot of time. Do you have any suggestions on maybe differentiating or, you know, in terms of the assignments that could be turned in, or ways that he could promote more communication? Anything that you've seen be successful?
Sure, absolutely. First of all, I love 9th and 10th graders. 10th graders are my heart. I love 10th graders, 7th graders, and kindergartners for some reason. I think they're all at a point in their lives where they're transitioning from from little kids to more serious.
Right.
So first of all, when it comes to any kind of homework or assignment, I start with my question to myself of what is my academic purpose?
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm giving a homework assignment, I actually have flipped my classroom because I find myself saying, if I'm giving a homework assignment, it's because I want them to do something with the information from that assignment. And I do this in my college course as well. And that is, students are very used to assignments simply being for points.
Mm-hmm.
So the first time I assign something, they come in to the next session and we start with, okay, guys, get out your homework and here's what we're going to actively do with it. We're not checking it. We're not going over answers. We're not doing any of those things. We're going to, you're going to be able to submit it to me and turn it in. But here's one thing that I thought we would do with what you learned in doing this assignment. So we're going to have a class discussion. We're going to create a Jamboard of images that this made us think about. We're going to write our own mathematics problem based on what it was. If I am giving them mathematics practice assignments, which I'm not a math teacher, I just play one on TV, that I'll have them thinking about collaboratively coming up with a word problem that you would give to help someone better understand the math problems that you practiced last night in a collaborative group. And what I found was the first time they do it, the students who are used to those assignments just being for points and didn't do their homework, they didn't do their homework, so they feel a little bit like, I should probably do my homework next time to be able to more fully participate. Mm-hmm. And after that, you'll see an increase in those assignments being done and coming in because they have meaning for the students and because the responsibility is kind of baked into the follow-up activity. Mm-hmm. And that would just be, I'm very much a intrinsic motivation person more than an extrinsic. So yeah, that's what I would do.
I think that's great. And I think also, since we do have some folks with us who are from induction, this might also help both the newer teachers as well as the mentors, because in many ways, we have to remember that our mentors feel like first-year teachers now. Yeah. And we have to provide supports and take care of them in asking them to, like you had said before, restructuring what they had done for many years and now put it in this format and mentor a new teacher on, things that they are sometimes a page ahead of the new teacher.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, all right. Well, Dr. Kassab, I want to thank you so much for joining us today for our virtual think tank. I also want to thank everyone who joined us in attendance. And I'm just going to go back to the screen. And if you just want to tell us what's here, how we can get in touch with you, then we'll close out this think tank.
Great. So if you have any questions or want to connect on any of the assignments that you've seen here, I am Lara Kassab, Lara.K as in kiss, A as in apple, S as in Sam, S as in Sam, A as in apple, B as in boy, at sjsu.edu. That's my email address. You can follow me on Twitter at Dr. Lara Kassab. And I also have a YouTube channel here. I put in a bit.ly so you can find it. And I look forward to engaging with you in the future.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. And also thank you to everyone who attended with us today. Very excited for you to be with us. I am also excited at all of the wonderful online tools that we have, because I definitely see this as something that we're going to be going forward with, and definitely something that will continue to evolve as we work with students and also with practitioners learning the craft. So thank you so much.
Of course. Thank you.